reflex is just a touch off there. So you get to hear that for a second before the fanfare. Hi, good evening. Welcome to Momentous Live, episode 76. I'm Tristan Jutra.
I'm Tasia Custodi.
And I'm William Silver.
Oh, I like the mellowness there. We are perfectly prepared. Everything is calm, better than it was before. We didn't have an entire show ready to go and then have to blow it up at the last minute. Not at all. Nothing like that. Hopefully, the guests that we had lined up will be able to join us next week. We'll see. But we've got all sorts of interesting yet different stories for you this week.
Dun dun dun.
People tell me I talk too fast, so I'm going to do the extreme opposite this week.
I was wondering, like, did you take emo Phillip pills or what was going on there?
Stephen Wright.
Weird.
Stephen Wright. Was it? I thought I had mono, but it turns out I was just really bored.
I've been there.
My girlfriend in university, first year university, I think had mono once, but somehow I didn't get it. So let's start with some follow-up, shall we? Actually, before I know, right? Before we get to some stories, speaking of cool stories, you can find out about us at momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, instagram.com/momentous.tv, and on YouTube, search for my name and find the Momentous playlists there. I have a links page somewhere. Maybe it'll be ready next week, so we only have to say one link, one web address for you, but it didn't have it ready quite in time because that's the nature of our operation here. Let's get into some follow-up stories. Last week, we spoke about Samsung Unpacked for August 2022, where they unveiled updates to a number of their devices, including the Galaxy Z or Z Flip 4, the Galaxy Z Fold 4, and the Galaxy, I always want to say AirBuds, like the movie Airbud, Galaxy Buds, some other stuff. Anyway, a little bit, the reviews are starting to come out for some of these devices, and believe it or not, people are actually liking the Galaxy Z Flip 4 at the very least. We're seeing some positive reviews from Engadget and other websites out there saying that they've been fixing some of the issues with the Galaxy Z Flip 3, such as the battery life. There's been refinements to the design as well. Still working on the camera quality per se, but they'll get there. One of the neatest features of this phone is having that little screen on the outside where you can see things like image previews and even interact with your phone to a certain extent there. But there's a certain segment of the market that is looking for a foldable phone. Like in these Samsung and Microsoft and others have been like taking several kicks of the can, refining as they go over the last few years. Of course, the speculation is hot as to whether Apple will get into this market or not. Now, Tasia, you had some strong words for the foldable phones last week. Some of these reviews changing your mind at all? And you also had some feedback from a friend of yours too, who didn't get this model, but the Fold. So why don't you start us off?
This does not change my mind. I stand by what I said. Okay, y'all are nuts. Who wants something thick like that? I'm gonna fold it up, and now I'm gonna have this thing protruding from my tight little jean pockets.
Costanza phone.
Yeah, exactly. Remember the Costanza wallet? When I close it, everything flew everywhere. It's like, or I have a little clutch or a purse. You can't put that in anything. No, I'm not here for it. So I do have a friend that just got the Fold 4.
Mm-hmm. And that's the one that opens like sideways like this and makes like a little tablet instead of like a traditional flip style phone.
Yes. And so I've told him to report back and tell us how it is so that next week we can do a little follow-up, like his first week with the Fold 4. But they're all about the folds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I'm gonna ask him. Pourquoi?
Different strokes for different folks.
Why would you do such a thing? I like in this video though that they show that you can set it up like a TP, because that's really what I need from my phone. like a triangle on the table. Like what? Like, and
hey,
who needs
video calls that could be
that
handy.
Small?
A screen that small. Well,
In a
fair
screen
enough,
that small with a terrible camera. You all understand how we use our phones, right? They're cameras. First and foremost. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I think the future of our show together should just be finding things that get
for her to rant about.
Yeah. Exactly. Because that's the most fun that we have here. It's like, let's dig up things that
Tasia going off.
Right? And I'll tell you it's something else. Not kidding.
And another thing. Will, how about you? Is this this review and some of the others that we're seeing with the actual hands-on these latest foldables from Samsung moving the needle for you at all?
Here's the thing. I've said this. My wife is very interested in this. I'm an Apple guy. I really don't have much interest in this phone. But in my opinion, there is something about the form factor, anyways, about folding something. There's something about that feels natural for a phone, like hanging up or, closing it, like shutting it down. It does fold it in half and get smaller. Now, to Tasia's point, if it's twice as thick, you fold it, you sort of reduce some of the usefulness of that folding form factor. So if it was thinner and it folded, I think you'd have a big advantage. Something like the Razor was small overall, right? Like it wasn't as thick as a regular phone. It was skinny. One side of it was so skinny that you might actually break it by accident if you were too angry. But yeah, so I think, some of the advantages of having that form factor about closing something up, having it half the length and putting it in your pocket is negated by it being twice or three times as thick when you put it together. So that's that would be my thought on it. I like the idea. It's great if they're clearly refining it. They have a goal of getting this better, working better. The camera still seems to be an issue, which, as Tasia says, is a huge problem these days when other manufacturers like Apple are so ahead of the game on,
and even Samsung on their other phones, like
phones,
like the Galaxy Ultra and stuff.
And so theoretically, they should be able to do it, but just not this format. Sorry, Tasia.
No, I kind of interrupted you. I just wanted to add on to what you're saying, because it's like the same people that complained, is the word I will use, about like the Pixel 6a screen, which by the way is really good, and unless you're like a super pro user and you come from a super high-end device, you wouldn't notice any lag on the screen. How can you tell me that staring at a device that has a noticeable crease down the middle wouldn't drive you up the wall? Like, that drives me crazy. So you're going to complain about one thing, but then this is like the coolest new gadget. No,
here's my response to that.
The notch.
The notch. Lots of us are living with the notch nowadays, and they're even putting it on. Apple's even putting it on laptops. So if we can get used to the notch, couldn't we get used to a crease?
Oh no, I don't look at it. It's very triggering for me. Don't like it. Nope. Mm-mm.
All right.
Mm-mm.
So, Will, what if Apple made a folding phone, whether it was in this form factor or the sideways, kind of like the Z Fold? Would you be tempted by that, since you're pretty deep into the Apple ecosystem?
here we go. I'm going to use the variation of my "I'm not the first person on the transporter" reply, which is
Acknowledging that the stakes are decidedly lower in this case.
the stakes are decidedly lower, but I'm not putting my money behind that until they work it out. I'm not paying for their R&D. I want this to be a well worked out, well thought out product uh, before I put money into it.
And that's something that Apple tends to do more so behind the scenes. While others, such as Samsung, are happy to experiment more in public, Apple likes to get things a little further along in terms of refinement before getting it out there. And now we could say things like the butterfly keyboard may be the exception that proves the rule there, or that it didn't turn out that well, or even like the Apple Watch in its first incarnation, even though physically it's pretty similar to today. From a software point of view, they made a lot of updates and subsequent revisions. But I think they are sitting back, probably have all sorts of models in the lab, and seeing what others come up with, and learning from them, and then trying to add their own Apple sauce, as it were, their secret sauce to see if they can add something to that category, because that's what Apple's always concerned with. As Tim Cook has said repeatedly, they want to be able to add value to a category before just jumping in and doing like a Me Too sort of product. That's why we haven't seen an Apple car yet. Because I mean, there's other reasons too, but we'll be hopefully talking more about vehicles next week. So yeah, I got to say, just having had a couple of flip-ish phones in the past, as we've discussed, I'm still open to it. I'd love to get one of these in the hand and see how it feels. Again, it's Android only because these are Samsung devices, but just wait until Google does one. That Deja will be all over it.
I'm going to review it, and I'm going to be honest about it. This is too much for me to handle.
Too much.
It's just...
Well, speaking of things that have good intentions but maybe sometimes go a little awry, last year we talked at great length about the various ways that tech manufacturers, smartphone or device makers, are trying to detect CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. So not the most fun topic to talk about, but Apple had basically revealed how that they were going to go about detecting such materials on their devices and engaging with the user to bring such materials to their attention, and at what point there may be authorities being notified and the like. And Apple came under quite a bit of fire because they were doing everything on device as opposed to scanning your images in the cloud like others, such as Google and Microsoft. So there's this whole philosophical debate about that. People are like, well, they shouldn't be going and scanning stuff on my phone. Well, it's like, at the end of the day, is it better for them to be scanning the stuff in the cloud? At least when it's on the phone, you have the opportunity to intervene. And they set pretty high thresholds there, perhaps after a little bit of revisiting, including such things as, you have to have 30 images, questionable images or more, before they start to get concerned. And they would do things like, if the user was under a certain age, bring to that user's attention that this may be questionable material. If you're sending this via iMessage to someone else, maybe you should rethink that. If you talk to your parents, et cetera, and even having an option under a family plan for parents to be notified. So there's a number of philosophical issues that could be debated in good faith by a number of people on their regards, privacy, but regards privacy of minors, and the best ways to go about detecting said materials, and then what to do with that information when said materials are detected. So this issue has come into very clear focus in the last week or so, because there was a user, an Android user, who used a fair number of Google services. And last year, I think it's late last year, Google, using their machine learning algorithms, flagged his Google-related accounts for potential abuse over nude photos of his sick child. And so what basically happened is this user took at the request of his doctor, sent a few images to the doctor of a rash and or swelling of the child's genitals. And the AI is going, wait a second, children's genitals aren't the sort of thing that we want to be sending around to people. That could be CSAM, child sexual abuse materials, red alert, red alert. And next thing you know, he loses access to all his Google accounts and cannot get a hold of Google to, figure out what's happening, to get his accounts reinstated. The authorities, Google actually alerted the authorities, and law enforcement reviewed the case and said there's nothing to see here. It's A-okay. This is a false alarm. But Google, as a policy, because they're not, in order to discourage people from, trying to get around the system, basically would not back down on the suspension, if not outright canceling of his accounts. And this guy couldn't even respond to the police via email because he couldn't access his Gmail account. So pretty sticky sort of situation, and it just kind of drives home the one of the problems with having automated systems scanning our data, our media for such materials, and then automatically notifying authorities. And then that's one thing, but just having no recourse. We have all these giant organizations. Have you ever tried to get tech support from Facebook or Instagram? I mean, Google's tricky. The only way to get tech support from Google basically is if you're an advertiser, because that's who the customers are for a lot of these organizations. So if you're, let's I'm going to start with you on this, Tasia, because you have an intimate relationship, even more so than Will or me, with Google's ecosystem. What's your take on this? Is Google right to just cancel these guys' accounts forever, or should they have some sort of official appeals process? This seems broken to me, but what do you think?
Well, it's not that easy, because in this specific case, it seems insane, right? Yes. That okay, obviously the police, are there. They understand this was a photo for a medical purpose thing that we had to do. But there's a lot of gray area. So in this case, I don't agree that they're not giving this guy his accounts back. But it's how do they assess these one-on-one scenarios? Because this probably happens all the time, you guys, and we don't hear about it because people are perverts, or it's a bigger issue than, do you know what I'm saying? So Google's perspective is, just because you've been cleared by police doesn't mean you're necessarily innocent of, the thing that you did. And the thing that you did was send photos of this child's privates, right? So I understand what they're saying, but I do think there should be a type of appeal process. You can imagine, though, let's pretend, devil's advocate, there's appeals processes in place. They have a dedicated team that help people that this happens to, or whatever, whether it's this or mistakenly, you can't get into your stuff and they think they flagged the wrong thing, whatever. But then what happens if, say, this person was, not this, say, as an example, somebody was doing this stuff and getting away with it and saying, oh, I did this for whatever purpose, right? Cleared by the police. They do it again. Can you imagine the hot water Google would be in? People would be like, oh, how could you give this guy his accounts back? How could you even do this? And Google would be like, listen, they were cleared, blah, blah, blah. So I also see that side of it. And I know that is an extreme, but that's the reality of it. So, hopefully now that this guy's gone public and there is an article, that usually forces companies, it forces their hand, and hopefully he'll get his account back. And then hopefully he'll make a backup and save all his contacts out so that he can email people and be like, I'm locked out. But yeah, I see both sides in this particular case. That's what you're saying, though, TJ, is these huge companies don't have dedicated people to deal with, this one guy's case came up. They have multi-million users. It's like, how do you sort
Yeah.
through the gray areas?
You
Because
you
this is
mentioned
good
the
technology.
yeah.
We want this technology. It's a nice step. Then there's all the gray areas.
Well, you mentioned the volume of cases, and in 2021, Google reported over 600,000 cases of child sexual abuse materials to the NCMEC's cyber tip line. And the
In 1 year.
NCMEC, yeah, in 1 year, alerted the authorities of over 4,200 potential victims of said crimes as well. So, I mean, that's rough. Oh, the other, not only did he lose contact to his emails, contacts, or lose access to his emails, contacts, photos, but even his phone number because he was using Google Fi's mobile service.
Oh
Oh my.
no.
Yeah, I mean that's speaks to having all your eggs in one basket. I'm a big belt and suspenders fan. I like to have some things. I mean, as much as I'm deep in the Apple ecosystem, there's certain essential services that have spread across multiple service providers. We talked about Rogers outage several weeks ago, and we have Fido. I have a Fido cell phone, which is on Rogers network, but my wife has a TELUS cell phone, and our landlines tell us so because we still have landlines because we're of a certain age. So, I mean, that does, you had touched on this, Tasia, the having backups, having a plan B should, the worst happen because most of us wouldn't have this specific issue, but you never know how, like for that, that the chances of your account getting suspended for other reasons. And sometimes it's for, I was dealing today with an organization that, we've done a little bit of volunteer work for in the past, and they fell victim to another Google issue that we talked about a few weeks ago, where Google Workspace was now moving everyone to paid accounts. There was no free Google Workspace services anymore, which is like the fancy version of Gmail, Google Sheets, Google Drive, all that sort of stuff. And you could use your custom domain with, but they're not super technical users. And next thing you know, they're having to set up billing information, and they had all these user accounts set up that most of which weren't even being used. And meanwhile, they can't access any emails of people trying to donate to their organization or volunteer or adopt. It's a canine rescue organization. So there's just like all sorts of stuff it's been a week now. And so they asked for help because they know that Stephanie and I are a little techie, so we're helping them go through that issue. So that's another case where if you have no plan B, you're kind of out of luck. But of course, in this sort of situation with CSAM, the stakes are that much higher. And with the volume that we're talking about here, is like that's why these organizations are relying on artificial intelligence to do the scanning. But I think that with most large tech companies, especially social platforms and the software as a service platforms, they rely so much on AI, and they probably understaff by design on the customer support, which feels like you're screaming into a void. Like I've never had a reply from Instagram on why we can't get our proper username for Momentous TV. Why do we have Momentous.tv? It's available, but we can't register it. Like stupid things like that.
Right.
Can you get a hold of anyone? So the fewer people they have to hire to do customer support, the more profits they make. Mm-hmm. Hey, profits are good, but maybe you should do your job properly. And then once you've covered that, then the rest is profit, right? So now, Will, have you ever had an experience with a gigantic corporation, tech or otherwise, where you have felt like you've been trapped in some sort of Kafka-esque nightmare, or maybe that early 80s movie Brazil, where you have to getting like duct work done, you have to hire Robert De Niro, who comes in on a zip line to get your black market air ducts repaired or installed, or some case where it's been really difficult to get any sort of kind of customer support. I know whether it's with a hosting provider or what have you. Have you ever been trapped in that kind of nightmare?
Knock on wood, no. But you guys bring up a good point. This is probably part of the problem. I know this goes, what I'm talking about goes beyond just this particular case, although this is a quite, notable case, is that in general, these things like Google, YouTube, Twitter, we're relying on them like we used to rely on the telephone company or the power company. They're so essential to what we do in our lives. And, there's some accountability, but not much. They're essentially like a nightclub. You know, like if they don't like your shoes, you just don't get in, and they don't have to tell you why. You just don't come in because they're a private company and they don't owe you anything, and you don't have a legal right to being in there. So it's not like Rogers that has rules that they have to go by with the CRTC or whatever when they broadcast TV. There's not the same rules in terms of customer experience or some sort of ombudsman that you can talk to when you have a complaint against Google. Like, they just don't answer your call. I know plenty of people that have problems with YouTube channels or being flagged or, saying
Suspended
that they
even. Yeah.
suspended offensive material, but they can't get an answer about what the offensive material was or try to plead their case. Because guess what? It's a nightclub. They don't have to say what it is. You just don't get into the club. So that's where, this is part of the problem with the way that we've built this whole thing. And part of my complaint to this would be, especially certain social media, we're providing them with their income. Because we are on the channel and using the service, they are making money off our eyeballs, but yet there's no accountability to, and in this case, this individual might have actually paid real money to get access to these services, not just,
especially Google Fi.
Not just going on them and having to look through some ads to get his email or YouTube or what have you. So that's my complaint, is how the whole system is stacked, where these guys don't have the accountability in terms of having to answer to the customer, because they honestly don't care about the customer all that much. And as you pointed out, Tristan, unless you're paying for their ad service where they make money from, there's plenty of you who are just posting little videos of your church picnic and going to the movies and what have you. They don't need your content, and you're not giving them any money. So thanks. But
can you imagine if they didn't let? Can you imagine if they didn't let sex offenders into nightclubs? They'd be practically empty.
I know, right? Then real people could listen to music and dance without getting groped for no reason.
What a dream.
I got groped once in a nightclub in Las Vegas.
Really?
And that's end of story. I was like, who was that?
I'm sorry.
Someone likes me.
This is a whole side story, but I met up with a friend. She was having a birthday party, and the first part of the night was ladies' night with strippers, and then after it turned into a normal club. And I showed up because I'm very punctual right after the gentleman got off stage, and I was coming in, and boy, was I the pick of the litter. I had at least 2 or 3 women grope me, and I was like, oh, is this what women feel like at a club normally?
Am I just a piece of meat to you? Yeah. Brutal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on from one problematic tech.
I don't know how we got down this road, but we did.
A company to another. So, believe it or not, we're still in the follow-up. So Twitter's former security chief says the company lied about bots and safety. Now, this is a bit of follow-up to the ongoing will they or won't they saga regarding Elon Musk's potential purchase of Twitter and apparently seemingly trying to back out of the deal. And one of the things he's been saying is that they've underreported their number of bots, even though in their original agreement that wasn't part of the requirements anyhow, et cetera, et cetera. So now this person who's being called a whistleblower has now saying that Twitter has a lot more security problems that they're willing that they've been admitting, and that has implications for the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission in the United States, and that kind of information could also affect the valuation for buyouts by suitors such as Elon Musk. So various security issues, and that including the ongoing bot problem. Now, Tasia is a longtime Twitter user and someone formerly with inside knowledge of how Twitter works. Can you give us any more color to this story? Is this much ado about nothing, or is there something rotten in Denmark?
I smell something fishy. You know what's fishy to me, actually? Like, let's all pause and take a moment to think about the timing of this little whistleblower moment,
Mm-hmm.
because how convenient for Mr. Elon Musk, isn't it? Um, I don't think this guy is blowing smoke. I think these are all major concerns for sure. Now, he claims this is the reason he was fired. We were not going to know that. He has to claim something in a suit when you're filing suit against somebody. But like, I just think the timing is odd because like now Elon subpoenas this guy to testify about the bot thing that Elon's arguing when it comes to why he's not going through with purchasing Twitter. So I just think the whole thing is like, are we looking into if they know each other? Because they probably do, because this guy's like a
Ooh,
known hacker.
their LinkedIn.
And right, like, do we know the connections of the web here, like how far it goes? It's just, I just question the timing and also the stance of this guy. Like, again, I believe what he's saying. I'm sure there's like a million security flaws, and he named a lot of them, not just the bot thing. One of them being, one of his claims was, like Twitter's not deleting user data when a user requests it, among other things. But so there's a lot of issues. I'm not questioning that. I'm just questioning, like, then he sits on his throne like, I just want to finish the job I was hired for. This is not the way you're going to be able to do that. So you come out publicly swinging and reported them to the SEC. So you're not going to get your job back.
Just so
That
we're
ship
clear.
has sailed. Yeah, to be clear, you burn that bridge. But to me, it's just the timing is intriguing, and I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Because, and to your point, does it matter if there's bots? Like, that's Elon's big thing, and it's like the only thing from what I remember at the beginning was they were supposed to disclose to him, right? Like or he wanted them to disclose to him how many bots or something.
Mm-hmm.
So is this really like a big thing that he can get out of this deal on? Elon's got a ton of money, and I just find this very fishy.
Well, and
nobody else thinks the timing is really convenient.
Well, of course, right? Stuff comes out of the woodwork. And this happened under the reign of previous CEO and original co-founder Jack Dorsey, and there was some other stories about actual spy type people who had infiltrated Twitter and had access to sensitive user data, and that's not a great look necessarily. No. This whistleblower, said he had gotten little to no support for his task of fundamentally changing the risky behaviors of Twitter's 8,000 employees. So yeah, I think there's more yet to come on here with regard to this story. So we'll watch this space. However, there's a little bit of other Twitter news from last week that they're developing a new reply filter option to give users more control over their tweet experience. And this is part of a number of features that Twitter has been rolling out over the last year or so. It seems that especially since there was rumblings of potential takeovers, they've been going in overdrive, announcing all sorts of features. Actually, a lot of that started when Jack Dorsey got a little bit spooked by some activist investors, and they started doubling down before he actually stepped aside. And one of the ongoing issues in Twitter is being able to avoid or block toxic users, toxic posts, replies, and whatnot. And they've continued to add features to help people have positive Twitter experiences. Now, a lot of people will rant about, Twitter being a toxic hell stew, but really so much of your Twitter experience is defined by the type of people that you follow on Twitter, for one thing. But then secondarily, the other side of that is by the people who follow you and decide to engage with your comments, especially if you are you're a high profile individual, a celebrity, if you're in politics, or if you're outspoken about whatever issues. There's a phenomenon known as reply guys, for example. And I think it's pretty clear that women generally have a tougher time on Twitter as well as other, as well as visible minorities. So this latest tool gives the original poster a bit more control. Tasia, what's your take on this? Is Twitter getting at risk of making itself too complicated, or is just exactly the sort of tool that users need to help make a safe space for themselves?
I don't think it's necessarily making it too complicated. We see this in a lot of other social networks, just in a bit of a different way. Like an example, with Instagram stories, you can just share to like close friends as an example. So you can set like a limited amount of people that are close friends that can see particular stories. This is kind of the same idea. It's just kind of saying like, hey, I know I have these certain accounts or whatever that, always reply with rude or inappropriate things. So I just want to set like who can respond to this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind it. I think it's, it's a nice way to allow the user to try to control their experience a little bit more, I think.
And it could be a way to keep Twitter as, pro free speech as possible, because freedom of speech does not equal freedom of reach, as they like to say. So if you don't like what people are saying when they're exercising their freedom of speech, being an American company there and having that as part of their constitution, say, you know what, you can say all you want, but I don't have to listen. Mm-hmm. And so this this tool seems to be in testing behind the scenes, hasn't been officially rolled out yet, but
I wonder if it's going to be like a paid thing, or if they're just going to like roll it out to everybody.
Maybe part of Twitter Blue, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of in line with, and I use this feature, how we can like report like tweets now and mm-hmm. say like this is like misinformation or this is whatever. Like I love that, because again, it's exactly what you're saying. I suppose they have a right to spew this nonsense, and if they're crazy and this is what they believe, but like now I can hit a button and be like, this is incorrect.
Yeah.
So I like it because, and it seems to work in terms of like, then they review the content. So it's not like an automatic takedown flag. Like if someone was just mad at you and like flagged a random thing you said, like it's mm-hmm. not an automatic takedown. So anyway, I know it's a different thing, but I like this. This feels like an extension of just making it more, putting the power a little bit back into the user themselves.
The tool reportedly says filter potentially unwelcome replies, and apparently it's using some of the same algorithmic force that they use to make you think twice before actually posting something. There's a feature, want to review this before tweeting? So now this is the opposite side, where it's detecting things that if someone says, actually I don't need to review this, I know exactly what I'm going to say, shots fired, pew, pew, pew. But then the person on the other end is getting a warning saying, hey, just say, do you want to filter this kind of stuff out? Because so-and-so is being a DB mm-hmm. over here. So I mean, I generally speaking, I think more control is better from the users, and that way you don't have to clamp down so hard on the whole free speech thing. Of course, certain things should never be tolerated, such as threats of violence and the like. But sometimes people just don't want to deal with trolls and so on. When it comes to social platforms like Twitter, there's been some news, some research from a fellow named Felix Kraus, who is determined that Instagram and Facebook can track anything you do on any website in their in-app browser. So this story came out a couple of weeks ago and got people a little bit concerned. So, in some apps, when you click on a link, it doesn't actually open the Safari app on your iPhone or iPad. Instead, what you have is an in-app web view, mm-hmm. which uses the Safari rendering engine, but somehow they can use, and a lot of the same protections are supposed to be in place, but somehow Meta, through Facebook and Instagram, have figured out a way to keep tracking users, despite their choice to opt out of the all this cross-site and cross-app tracking that Apple introduced a while back, and apparently Facebook/Meta took a $10 billion hit to their revenue because of that. So Meta's got a Meta, and they're finding ways around this. So just very quickly, if you want to get around this issue, you can just make sure to, rather than as soon as you open in the web view, there's usually a button where you can open in your actual browser on your phone, your browser default browser, which is usually Safari, unless you choose Chrome or one of the other iOS browsers, which all still use the Safari rendering engine. Another pro tip that I've failed we failed to mention when talking about the CSAM issue: if you need to send pictures of sensitive photos of your children to doctor, maybe don't. Maybe take the kid in. I know it's tough with COVID. We're still at the tail end of pandemic supposedly, but maybe just don't take any photos like that with your devices that could be construed as being abusive material. So that's our tip from earlier. And then our tip for now: use the default web browser that instead of the in-app browser in Facebook, Instagram, and other apps. All right,
and when in doubt, just assume you're being tracked.
Yeah, of course. And it's like, wow, these ads I'm seeing are really relevant to me. Oh, poop, that means I'm being tracked.
Right.
I just want to add that while it wasn't of this nature, I know people who had like surgery on their foot and were asked by their doctor during the pandemic, because the offices were closed, to take very detailed pictures of their foot and the stitches from and it was specified like 20 different angles, and they had to take all the photos and all this kind of stuff. So I think some of this was going down in the pandemic. Now, that particular person I'm thinking of, it wasn't sensitive material, it was just a picture of their foot, but that also would have been pretty gross photos if someone had seen 20 pictures of stitches and screws and stuff like that. So
I bet there's an OnlyFans for that.
Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't true, but you're probably right. So I'm just saying that, I think maybe this is a particular comedy of errors coming together. But as Tasia said, it's always good just to assume you're being tracked or someone's looking at it.
And you can always go back and revisit the privacy settings on your device, such as your smartphone, your tablet, or your computer too. Just, it's good to check those out once in a while, because they can change. They can add new features. Sometimes things get reset accidentally. Even social platforms, web services you use. There was a thing like 10 years ago now where Facebook added some feature. I remember they were trying to compete with Foursquare back in the day. And by default, they made it so your friends could check you into places. And that's kind of privacy invading there too. All of a sudden, the whole public knows where you are. So we encourage people back at that time to go and turn that feature off. So if you want to check yourself into somewhere so the world knows where you are, great. But for other people to be able to do that by default, that's like a whole opt-out thing. Not great user-friendly practice there by any stretch. So in other wholly unrelated news, there's a story that some of you may have heard about in the last few days, which seems a little strange. And at first you think, is this like some kind of urban legend or what? Well, as it turns out, there was a story about certain Windows XP laptops with certain models of hard drive running at 5,400 RPMs, that if you happen to be playing the song Rhythm Nation by Janet Jackson nearby, it could make your hard drive crash. And it's like, how is that even a thing? Well, apparently there's something
specific.
Yeah, I know, right? And how does it even get discovered? It's just one of these things that enough people have to try it out. Maybe someone, complained about it on a message board or something. It turns out it's a little something called vibration resonance. And it is a real phenomenon. Now, some of you may have seen a video of a Galloping Gertie, which was a bridge, I believe in Tacoma, Washington. That was it back in the 60s or something. And it had to do with when there was the certain type of wind, or a certain speed, it would cause, I'm going to see if I can pull up a clip really quickly here.
It's a famous clip. I remember seeing it in like Pioneer speaker commercials for years and stuff.
Tacoma
like that.
Narrows Bridge. Yeah, there was a wind of a certain speed just kind of hit that bridge in a certain way and caused it to undulate.
You.
Is that triggering for you there, Tasia?
Oh my gosh. I actually am scared when I cross bridges. I
Uh-huh.
don't like them. This is very upsetting. Oh my God.
Right. So, don't worry. I have a similar fear of going to the southern hemisphere because I don't want to fall off the planet. So, it's a similar kind of idea here, but instead it's with Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation and your 5400 RPM hard drive on your Windows XP computer, and it's just like, fascinating kind of stuff. It's like too strange to be true, but you know what? It's actually true after all. So, I mean, if you're really interested, you could go and like try to recreate it yourself if you've got a lot of spare time. But
now that song's in my head.
we are part of the Algorithm Nation.
Yeah, is this the Janet Jackson note?
Oh, like the brown note?
They talk about the brown note. Is this the Janet Jackson note? I told you I was going to take this in bad directions.
Make your laptop poop its pants. No one likes that. Speaking of nothing in particular, just a fun little side thing from Google. This is, it's in today's episode of Bad Google, Good Google, Good Google, Bad Google, just like we have with Apple and others. Good meta, bad meta. There was something released on the artsandculture.google.com website recently called Paint with Music. And there's 4 different themes from which you can choose. And you can basically compose music visually. And you gotta give it a try. There's some...
This is relaxing.
Different... You could add, saxophone, trumpet, violin, even whale sounds. And next thing you know, you're a musician. So, Will, I am looking forward to seeing you adding some of this.
Yes, Will, your assignment.
Your upcoming beats. Give it a go. It's quite fascinating. Yeah. And it's visually kind of interesting as well. It's also very easy to make it sound terrible. And I can't turn off the audio.
Just like real music.
Exactly. So our 4 different themes here, just to reiterate for those interested in giving this a go, are...
This is cool.
Wait for it. Come on. Splash screens. I thought we were done with those. In the sky, underwater, on the street, and on paper. So that's not really a pick of the week because that's something different, but it's just another cool little thing to, brighten our days, get us away from the child sexual abuse material and terrible tech companies.
Yeah.
So give it a go.
That's a nice little meditation break.
Right? All right. So that's it for our stories this week, our follow-up and our new stories. It's kind of our late summer, light on the news sort of things, although we have lots and lots of stuff to talk about when it comes to EVs and movies. Hopefully next week, but all that stuff got bumped. But so let's start with picks of the week. And Tasia, why don't you go first?
My pick of the week is the Wired YouTube channel. I don't know if you guys subscribe, but it's a strong recommendation. So I love, honestly, most of their content, but I will just highlight like one of the series things I like. So that second video there, TJ, is like the audiologist answers hearing questions. So what they do is like this whole segment, and instead of like ask the tech expert, they cross out the word tech and like fill it in with whatever you can think. Like they've had morticians, like ask the mortician expert. It was so fascinating. He's had to come back 2 or 3 times. Like the stuff you learn, from all these experts across, like literally name anything people could be, a librarian or, like any field of expertise. And they answer Twitter's questions. So they'll have like a whole segment. And then if they're super popular, they'll bring them back and they'll like do even more. And people ask wild questions. They ask really good questions where you're like, I was thinking of this too. And so I just learned so much. I just find them fascinating. I learned so much. That's just one of the favorite things on their channel. Very good channel.
Yeah, and
educational.
And that video that you refer to, but with the audiologist, has over 200,000 views, and the Wire channel itself has
In
almost 10 million subscribers. One of the other regular features they do is having a lot of actors, musicians, and other sorts of
yes,
celebrities answering Google's most asked
autocomplete.
questions. Yeah, the autocomplete thing, and that's always fun.
That's my
And
second favorite one
yeah,
too. After this one, the expert one, that's the other one I was going to say was the autocomplete interview. And they give them like these physical, just like a visual Google search boards, and they rip off each question at a time. And it's just the most searched for questions on Google when it comes to this celebrity. And it's pretty fun to watch. But most of the content, like that's more like the fun content, though you do learn about the celebrity. A lot of their other stuff is like very educational, but done in a way that like lay people, me, can understand. So like when an audiologist is answering questions or a mortician, I recommend, it sounds so morbid. You guys need to go on Wired YouTube channel and watch the mortician ones. There's 2 or 3, and it's the same mortician that comes back, and like the stuff I learned about that industry, oh mama, like what? It makes you really think about what you maybe want done with your body after you die, because it's like fascinating though. And I love watching people that love what they do. You know what I mean? And they can explain things in a way that's understandable, and you can tell they're passionate about it. So that's my pick of the week.
you know what I'm doing with my
Wired.
body after I die? OnlyFans channel.
Oh, geez.
No.
This has been a crazy episode, but I guess all of our episodes are crazy episodes. So, you know.
So I strongly
If that's your final wish, we will do
second your
that for you.
recommendation. The Wired YouTube channel has got lots of great stuff. So, Will, check it out. And speaking of
It
Will,
sounds interesting.
Great.
what
You'll
is
go down a rabbit hole.
your
It's so good.
what is your recommendation this week, Will?
You know, my recommendation is She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. It's a bit of a strange one, but this is also, you know, what I always used to say about, you know, pieces of fiction like Lord of the Rings or other stuff is you weren't given enough time with such good source material to tell all the stories you wanted to tell. And one of the things that Disney Plus, I think, has allowed Marvel and Disney to do is tell some stories that probably wouldn't have been told otherwise, that wouldn't have made big budget summer movies. And, you know, a character like She-Hulk, it's funny, it's quirky, it's a little bit like Ally McBeal meets the Avengers. You know, it's just kind of fun. There's a little bit of a Deadpool aspect about breaking the fourth wall and talking to the crowd. You know, this is obviously no spoilers. There's a lot about reluctant heroes, but it's told in a way that we've heard that story before about reluctant heroes, but this is a different perspective on a reluctant hero, and I think it's very interesting. I recommend it. I'm not going to say, you know, we're one episode in. I'm not going to say it's my favorite show ever, but it's unique. It gives another spin on things, and it's fun. It's not Thor. It's not Captain America. It's not a big budget summer movie. It's a story about, you know, a woman who is trying to get a career in law and get ahead, and she's given superpowers, and comedy ensues.
She's a great actress too.
Yes. Yeah, I loved her in the, what was it, the Perry Mason.
Oh, yeah. She was on Orphan Black as well.
Orphan Black?
Yes. Yeah. Tatiana Maslany. How do you say her last name? I can't
Something like
remember.
that.
That's it, right? Yeah.
And
really good.
we had just wrapped up Ms. Marvel, which we watched on your recommendation, Will. Though I got to say, we probably would have watched it anyway because we're just watching all the Marvel TV series on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Because we are level 7 susceptibles and apparently have no free will. So, but Ms. Marvel was fun. It was a pleasant surprise, very different. And again, you know, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I just love the title itself. It's just amazing. It's like someone was saying the other was.
It was your wife.
Was that you?
No, I think your wife said
yeah.
it was it Caveman Attorney at Law?
Yeah, no, Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer vibes
Yeah.
from Saturday Night Live. Phil Hartman.
Yes.
So yeah,
Also, Harvey Birdman, attorney at law, would be another one.
Exactly. So my wife Stephanie was very skeptical, having seen the trailer for this, and we both enjoyed it. It was fun. Like we'll see where it goes. I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Ruffalo is only there at the beginning, just kind of to pull people in, and then she gets to tell the rest of her own story throughout. I believe it's only going to be 6 episodes. So I think Disney Plus and Marvel are doing this right. Just these tight little stories, or maybe more like extended movies, but when they're broken up across a number of weeks, it feels a little bit more digestible. I think these ones are about half an hour, roughly. So yeah, I mean, so far so good. We'll see. Some of the CG was a little rough, and I think that is just placed to there's the budget
It's a lower
issue
budget,
there.
yeah.
So so
The other
Tasia,
thing,
I mean, you seem skeptical to me, but give it a try.
I've thought about giving it a watch, but
it's actually
yeah,
pretty good. I
there's
think if you were to watch one, this might be the one to watch. I'd also say Miss Marvel is really an interesting story. It's just about a girl who happens to be a superhero. There's bigger things at work, and really the superhero part is. Some of my friends were complaining there wasn't enough superhero in Miss Marvel. I would
hmm
say that this could be a similar thing where it's just taking a different turn on
It's,
superheroes rather than this big budget, blowing up aircraft carriers and stuff
yeah,
like that.
there's
So
only there's only so much punching you need in shows as well,
yeah.
right? I mean, that's always been the challenge there.
Can I also say this is the formula that Marvel is stealing from wrestling, which is in wrestling, you have a developed star like Hulk Hogan, and he goes against the new star, and eventually he loses to the new star. And they call that in the wrestling biz giving the guy the rub, right? And not
hmm
like giving him a bit of your fame. They get a bit of your shine from you. So very much like you said, Tristan, this is the Hulk passing the torch to the younger hero, and now you go off and tell your story. They did the same thing with Hawkeye. They did the same thing with the Black Widow and the new Black Widow. They're doing this with a lot of their heroes because they're passing the torch to a new generation of superheroes in the MCU. So
And
I think this is a little bit of the formula going on. I'm not saying I don't like that. I'm just saying you can see the formula that's happening here.
mhm. And this is all, I think, part in helping to set up whether it's West Coast Avengers, Secret Wars, et cetera, as they start telling the stories of all
Thunderbolts,
these,
yeah.
yeah, all these other heroes that we're not that familiar with yet, and it's kind of like it, even a more sophisticated way or approach like that they than what they did with Avengers in having the Iron Man movies, Thor movies, and then having an Avengers movie. So they told a couple of other stories before jumping right in, and then I think we've talked about this before. Like they forgot that lesson when they launched Eternals with like 10 new
Yeah.
heroes that we're supposed to care about somehow, but we didn't know anything about any of them. So
Yeah.
maybe they're they're relearning the lessons
They got a
here.
big head after their success with Black Panther and Guardians of the Galaxy and Iron Man, who no one knew before that they came out and thought they could just put anything on screen and it would work. But turns out that's not true.
So when it comes to another franchise type property, and one that we've talked about before, like we talked about in anticipating She-Hulk and Attorney at Law, and now it's finally here. One thing that we started talking about last year was Prey, which is the latest installment in the Predator franchise, and I saw that this weekend and did not disappoint. It was initially like in pre-production, it was being referred to as Prey. Then they started referring to it as Skulls, and then they changed it back to Prey again. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there, but this tells the story of the Predator coming to Earth in the 1700s, and predators are going to predator, predators are going to prey, and uh, whether they're hunting people. Well, I'm not going to give two spoilers away. There's a few different things going on, a few different things being hunted by maybe different parties there, but it was a really neat take on the predator type of story in a very different setting, which was neat to see. And again, it was I think one of the things about this movie is that virtually the entire cast were all Native American, and with some notable exceptions as appropriate there. And it was just, I don't know, I really liked it. It was really kind of going back to basics. It had some apocalypto vibes a little bit, and this is a couple hundred years later than that movie, but if you like, sort of pretty straightforward. It's only an hour and 40 minutes, so they're not overstaying their welcome. It's directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who directed 10 Cloverfield Lane. Again, another part of an existing franchise, which was only kind of vaguely related to the original Cloverfield movie there. But Dan Trachtenberg was on a web show back in the mid to late 2000s called Totally Rad Show that, Will, I know you and I used to both watch, and that was inspiration for us to a certain extent here. But Prey on Disney Plus. Now, my only complaint is that I had to watch it on Disney Plus and I couldn't see it in the theater, because this would have been great in the theater.
Well, by the way, there were people complaining about that. There was a lot of complaints.
That's what I forgot to do. I should have gone to Twitter.
Yeah.
It doesn't count if you don't post it online.
Yeah. All right. So we've got just one project this week, and that is from you, Tasia. Another video. You're a YouTube machine. What do you got for us this week?
This one was kind of best hidden iPhone tips. So just things that help people get the most out of their iPhone, because a lot of people don't actually know all that it can do. So there's a lot of things, like a lot of people don't know you can scan and sign documents just using the Notes app, things like that. I go into in the video. Little nuggets for everybody. Nuggets of wisdom.
As always.
Gonna have to give that a watch.
It's
fun. It's fun discovering stuff like that your device has been able to do, either since the outset or thanks to a recent software update. And it's like a tool that keeps getting features added to it, and that can be really neat. So yeah, we'll definitely check out the 10 iPhone tips you should know. And where can people see that, Tasia?
You can head to youtube.com/Tasia Custodi.
Love it. And where can they find out all your work?
You can head to my website, which is TasiaCustodi.com. It's the
Even
easiest name to spell.
And you can learn more about Momentous good luck. Hey, quick, read it on the screen now. You can learn more about Momentous at momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv, instagram.com/momentous.tv. Grr. And on YouTube, search my name. Good luck spelling that, and find the Momentous playlists there. Hopefully next week we'll have an actual links page, and we can just give you one web address to follow. But and hopefully next week we'll have a jam-packed episode of stuff. And there's sometime in September, there's an Apple iPhone event coming as well. So we might be doing that in a couple of weeks, or maybe the week after, depending if it's on a Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll see. People are talking that September 7th or 8th, so stay tuned. But until then, Tasia, Will, everyone else, we hope your week is truly momentous.